Hello, and thank you so much for joining us for today's episode of Thursdays with AARP Wisconsin. I am Amber Miller, Associate State Director with AARP Wisconsin. Before we get to our guest today, just a couple updates. We have some upcoming online virtual events that you can find on our website at aarp.org/Wisconsin, including a partnership that we are doing with the American Red Cross, because as you might know, September is National Preparedness Month. So you can find all upcoming virtual events online. Also, make sure to check out our Community Connections website. This is a website that was launched earlier this year that can connect you with possible volunteer opportunities to help out your neighbor, and then also our AARP Friendly Voice initiative. And this is where you could call one of our trained volunteers and just to receive a friendly phone call. This could be daily, weekly, monthly, but just to hear a friendly voice on the other end. So you can find all that information at the website below. Today, our guests are going to be talking about engaging younger poll workers and also the initiative Power to Poll. So we have three guests today. I would love to bring them all up. And if you have any questions for any of our guests today, you could please post them below if you're on Facebook or YouTube, and we will be taking your questions live. So I'd love to introduce Scott Musser, who is the campaign's field manager of the Central Region of AARP Wisconsin. Hello, Scott.
Hi, Amber. Thanks for having me on today.
Absolutely. And my fabulous two coworkers, Lisa Lamkins, who is the Advocacy Director. Good morning, Lisa, or good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Amber.
And Arleen Casey, who is the Senior Operations Associate for the AARP Wisconsin. Hi, Arleen.
Hello.
Hello. Well, thank you guys so much for joining us today. This actually works out well that this is the topic today, because if you are viewing us right now, you may have joined us earlier this morning while Sam Wilson, our state director, announced some of the poll numbers, and especially this year with everything that's going on with the epidemic. Poll workers are extremely important to, the election year. So this is a really great topic for us to talk about. So Scott, AARP has a long history of voter engagement, and voters, of course, 50 and older are the largest voting blocks. Why is it then so important that we engage also the younger voters this year?
Sure. Thanks, Amber. Well, I think the big thing is, like you mentioned, ARP, we have our members are known for turning out the polls and voting on a regular basis every election year. But we really want to make sure this is an intergenerational effort come this election. There's a lot of important issues at stake. When you look at things that are important to 50 plus voters, like health and financial security, those are things that are important to voters of all ages. So we really want to make sure people are getting out there an opportunity to hear from the candidates, see where they stand. We especially know, given the current situation, the pandemic, it's a little harder this year. So we want to make sure people are getting out there, they know they can register to vote, how to vote safely, and then, of course, know where the issues are and where the candidates stand on those issues.
Absolutely. And Lisa, so there are so many important issues at stake, of course. What are we hearing from our members and other voters in our state of Wisconsin?
We're hearing that some of the core issues that we have always talked about continue to really be top of mind for older voters. And actually, as Scott mentioned, they're important to voters of all ages. Protecting Social Security and Medicare, and particularly because some of the challenges that we're hearing to the Social Security program right now, it's more important than ever to make sure that we protect Social Security and Medicare. Our members also want to make sure that the candidates are talking about lowering prescription drug prices, as too many people struggle with that. We're also concerned about keeping staff and residents of long-term care facilities safe. We are hearing the impact that the pandemic is having on the thousands of dead older people across this country. And so we have to make sure those people are safe. And then finally, obviously, helping people recover from the economic impacts of that pandemic. That continues to be top of mind for Wisconsin voters as well.
Absolutely. And Scott, with everything that's going on with the pandemic, I know AARP and especially AARP Wisconsin has done a really great job of trying to give resources and information about, voting safely from home. So what are we doing around the in-person voting?
Oh, exactly. And I think we've done a nice thing, and we've learned some of some of the experiences from the primaries and early voting earlier this year to see some of the stuff. We want to make sure that regardless of how somebody votes, whether it's in person, it's early, it's by mail, it's done safely. And a lot of that comes down to making sure that polling places are open and well staffed and have the right protection equipment needed to make sure that both the people that are working the polls and the people that are voting that day are safe. So AARP is really working to sort of advocate and push in that to make sure that that happens, that that's open and accessible and safe for people come election day.
And Scott, how is AARP working to address the need for more poll workers, especially with what's going on with the climate today with the epidemic?
Sure. In typical year, about 58% of poll workers are over the age of 60. And we know a lot of those poll workers may not be able to, may not feel safe volunteering this year to work the polls. So what we're doing is we're working with a number of different organizations under a group called Power the Polls. That's a one-of-a-kind initiative that actually has a database set up where people can log on and find out how to be a poll worker in their state. So that way they can really take this action. So we're working with them to communicate this out. We're working with groups like the Association of Young Americans, Rock the Vote, and other groups to really get this information out there so people know that we need to address this. We know in a given year, even without a pandemic, it's hard to recruit poll workers in some places. So we want to make sure it's there. And like I said, when it comes down to it, making sure that it's safe and accessible option for folks really requires that we have the people in place to help people vote in person. So we're really advocating people, if they're able to or know people that could potentially volunteer to help work the polls this year, to go to the website listed below here. They can find out, whether you live in Wisconsin or any state, you can find out how to do in your community. And it's a great way to sort of take action, make sure that we keep voting safe and secure for everybody of any age.
Absolutely. And I know Arleen, I know Arleen, but also I know Arleen has, volunteered at the polls. She's been a poll worker. And so Arleen, if you could talk a little bit about your experience of being a poll worker, what it kind of looks like in, the day of, and then what should people do if they're interested in helping this election year?
Well, definitely, it's a quite an experience to work the polls. I've only been doing it for the last 2 years. There is a mighty group of folks that have been doing it on a regular basis for several years at the polling station I'm at. But there's a lot of new folks that have been joining too, and it's been exciting. To begin with, before you actually go to the polls, you do have training. And that training is done by webinar, or you can, before COVID, you could go in and sit in an in-room classroom and watch it, or watch a videotape of the training. It gives you a lot of good background information about what's expected, and also the different types of jobs that are available at the polls. You get a chance to, work different areas of it. And I never realized until I did it myself, all the checks and balances that are in place at the polls to ensure that your vote counts, that you cannot vote twice, any of that nonsense that we've been hearing. It would be very hard to do, let's put it that way. The other thing that I was kind of surprised about, which I didn't even know, and I saw that on the little flyer there, is if you want to, you can get paid. And right now, the pay isn't too bad either, because they're not only paying you the small wage, but then you're also getting a hazard pay because of COVID. I've also noticed that they've really ramped up making sure that poll workers and voters are safe. And that includes, all sorts of protections, with sanitizing all the stations regularly, and wearing masks, and having protected screens up for the workers, and keeping people distanced apart. They mark the floors off quite well. And there's also drive up too, that you can, drive up in your car and be able to either drop off your ballot or be able to fill one out at the street and have that brought in by a poll worker. So I think that, it's a great way to do community service as far as I'm concerned. And, we are getting some younger folks joining, and that is wonderful, particularly because of with COVID going on and stuff, a lot of the regular poll workers are afraid to go in, even though I particularly think it's pretty safe. I encourage a lot of early voting and absentee voting, and a lot of people may not realize, but all of those votes are counted at the polling places too. So our workers are making sure that your vote is counted at the polls there. So.
Great. Arleen, thank you for your insight, because I have been pondering about volunteering myself, I think, on election day. And another person that inspired me was my across the way neighbor, who I believe she's around 70, and she was saying, I didn't see you voting this year. She was at the polling place, and I think she was looking for me, but she did mention how they had to work, the full day because of, they just couldn't get a lot of volunteers. So,
Right.
So what you're saying, I think, is like spot on. If this is like a really great way for somebody to, volunteer, but also support their community and the impact that the election makes.
Yes, and I would like to add that each polling station has folks that are in charge. There's one person in charge that really has been trained and is knowledgeable about all the different aspects of what has to be done at the polling place. And you really get a chance to, for me, I did it too, to kind of maybe get to know people in my community a little bit too. So, because most of the
Absolutely.
people working at my polls obviously live in my neighborhood too. So.
Yeah, great. Well, thank you, Arleen, so much for your insight. And I think it's great, to hear a firsthand story of somebody who's been working the polls, for a couple of years, just to, talk about how that you felt safe. And yeah, it has changed a little bit since COVID, but that they're taking the precautions and the measurements to make sure that the poll workers are safe. So thank you so much, Arleen. If you have any questions for any of our guests today, you could please put them below on Facebook, or if you're joining us on YouTube, you could please post it below and we will get to them very shortly. So my dear Lisa, with the changes around voting this year in Wisconsin, what are the important dates coming up, and what do people need to know and do?
Yeah, well, first I just want to again reiterate how important the poll workers are going to be, and in part because AARP just released a really cool survey this morning, and one of the questions we asked Wisconsin voters is, how are you planning to vote in this election? And Wisconsin voters age 50 plus, 40% of them are still planning to go to the polls on election day. And so that's pretty impressive. We still have, 40% who are going to show up at the polls, which really just, tells us how much we need those poll workers. In addition, we'll have 17% who plan to do early voting and 34% who are going to do absentee voting, which is also a huge increase. And as Arleen said, those also get counted at the polls on election day. So I just want to reiterate that need for poll workers. And one thing you can do as a voter to help poll workers and to help your local clerks out is to plan ahead. Make a plan early. And if you plan to vote by absentee ballot, vote early. The official deadline to request an absentee ballot is actually October 29th. But if you think about it, that does not allow enough time for your local clerk to mail you that ballot, for you to fill it out, and for you to mail it back. So we are encouraging folks, you can request your absentee ballot right now. In fact, if you haven't already requested it, you may have received a mailer from the Wisconsin Elections Commission that has an application for absentee ballot included in it. Request it now. The clerks are processing those requests, and absentee ballots will start being mailed out next week. So it really is an election season. Voting will be starting really within the next week to 10 days. Early voting will start on October 20th. And it varies in terms of your local municipality, when and where, what times. That's all very local. Voting is very local here. But people do have the option to go in early to your clerk's office or some other location that they determine and vote as well. So one last reminder, it is very important to know that at this point, and the way our election law stands, your absentee ballot has to be returned to your clerk's office no later than 8 p.m. on election day. It is not postmarked. We do not go by postmarks here in Wisconsin. It has to actually physically be at the clerk's office. Check with your local clerk. See if there are local drop boxes you can take it to early. You can always take it to the local clerk's office. Some communities are doing fun things like setting up poll worker stations in local parks. I know they're doing in Madison. But please don't rely on a postmark. Your absentee ballot has to be in the clerk's hands by November 3rd.
And I did notice, so I'm in Milwaukee, and just on the news, they were talking about how there's 13 additional drop boxes that were just being installed today. So if you happen to be in the Milwaukee area listening to this, definitely, check out, as Lisa said, the county clerk's office, which will have all the locations for those drop boxes. And we have a question from Jim, which we will bring up. So Jim is asking, what would you say to somebody who normally volunteers at the polls but is worried about catching the virus? And I will actually open this up to all three of you if there's any comments.
I can start and just say that they have really done a great job of making sure everybody is going to be sitting away from each other. Everything is going to be sanitized. Everything is going to be pretty much no touch. If, pens are used, you carry the same pen with you all day long. You don't set it down and, so I think, and the safeguards are in place there to really keep people safe. I am in a risk category just as my age, and it's like I am not worried about it at all. So, I really hope that people feel safe volunteering to help out. And there's plenty of jobs to be done too, that you're not talking to people all the time or interacting with folks. If you're helping with the absentee ballots, you're only working with one other person to do that. So that helps too. So.
Great.
Yeah, I think I'd add just, having obviously a conversation around, what sort of role and responsibilities you have that day, and just making sure that, but it sounds like, a lot of the safety procedures are being put in place, and that's part of what we're pushing for too, to make sure that it's there. And one of the biggest things that it goes back to, obviously the more people we have to help work on the polls on election day, the easier it'll be, the less crowded it will be, the faster people will move on, the more space we can create. Because one of the worst things we saw earlier this year was when, polling places got consolidated into maybe one large facility because we weren't able to have them because there wasn't enough staff. But obviously, talk to your doctor or other, medical expert, talk to the elections officials, and make sure that the safety procedures are in place. But I think for the most part, it will be good. We're trying to make sure this is obviously something that's safe for everybody involved, whether it's somebody voting in person or somebody working the polls.
And I'll just add in, I know the Wisconsin Elections Commission, and they're the ones who are in charge of all of the elections here within the state. They've given terrific guidance to all of the clerk's offices on the things that Arleen and Scott are talking about. So they really are prepared this time around to help keep people safe. And as voters, if you're planning to go to the polls, we can remember to do our parts as well. You bring your own pen, wear a mask, keep social distance if you have to stand in line, and then hand sanitize afterwards. It's really pretty simple, and that way we can help keep everybody safe.
And Lisa, I know AARP had last month some virtual webinars that were all about, voter education. And I know we have some coming up again. I don't know if you would like to talk about those.
Sure, we have a couple of things coming up because we do want to make sure that people understand their options and understand how they can vote safely in this pandemic. We're doing a series of 3 webinars. on September 22nd, September 30th, and October 7th. You have to register in advance. We'll send you a Zoom link, and you can go to the aarp.org/WI website. It's right at the very top where you can register to join us for one of those webinars. We're also going to be having a telephone town hall with the Wisconsin Elections Commission on September 17th. And you can go to that same website and get more information about that. We'll have that information up a little bit later this afternoon. So we are doing our very best to make sure that Wisconsin voters understand their options and know what it is they can do. Make sure their vote counts, make sure it's secure, and again, make sure that we all stay safe.
And the teletown hall and the webinars that you're talking about, Lisa, I know it's geared more towards the 50 plus voter, but I think, because I sat through one of them, I think it really could go towards any age if there's still questions about like, how do I vote? Where do I vote? Can I vote safely?
Absolutely. In fact, the ones coming up, we're really focused on people of all ages, on some multicultural communities. This is good information for anyone, right? We all want to stay safe. Nobody wants to catch the virus. And so it's good to know what the options are. There are a lot of rules that govern voting in Wisconsin, which is designed to make sure that our votes count and make sure that they're secure, which is why you can't really you can't see how people can claim that there's a lot of fraud when it comes to absentee voting or voting by mail, because in fact, we have a lot of safeguards in place. So as voters, we need to know what those safeguards are so we can make sure that our votes do count. So I encourage anyone to join us for those. You don't have to be 50, you don't have to be an AARP member, they're all free. And even maybe if you know the information, it's good information that you can share with others as well.
Exactly. I was going to say it's great information to pass on to any friends or family members. Because I think sometimes, there's been a lot of changes. There's a lot of things that people have to consider, voting this year, whether it's, around the issues, what they can do to help serve on election day, to, making sure they're able to vote safely, and what are the options. So it's a great thing for everybody to share with all their friends and families.
Absolutely. And it looks like we have a comment from Angela. I just want to pull up. So Angela just said, just as an FYI, absentee ballots can be dropped off at the Madison Library in their book drops. So that is another option, but you can always check with the library if you have any additional questions about that. But I want to thank you guys so much for being here today. If there's any final comments that you would like to make.
Well, I'll just start and encourage folks, because we have a great sort of one-stop shopping website that lets you know everything you need to know about voting. And it includes links to all of the sort of places within the Wisconsin voting system. If you need to register to vote, if you can request an absentee ballot, if you want to know the contact information for your clerk, if you go to aarp.org/WI votes, you can get all you need to know about voting safely in Wisconsin. And we know this election is more important than ever. And so we want to make sure that everybody's voice is heard.
Yeah, and I just add with that, it's a great opportunity to have conversations with your friends and family, to encourage younger voters. We hear a lot from our members talking about, talking to their kids and grandkids, why voting is important to them, what are the issues online. And like I said, there's a lot of that cross all generations, whether it's healthcare, financial security, prescription drugs, to Social Security, a lot of issues at stake this year that people are concerned about and want to vote for. And we want to make sure that people are able to vote safely, regardless of what method they choose. But if people are interested in either sharing with friends or offering to help work the polls on election day, they can go to the powerthepolls.org/AARP to find out there. And they'll put you in touch with your local elections official and to find out what you need to do that day to get signed up. So we appreciate everybody, helping spread this message. We want to make sure that in-person voting is safe and accessible for everybody.
Great. And Arleen?
Oh, I just hope a lot of people see this and see the other things AARP are doing around voter education. I really hope that we get some more poll workers. I know that they can be very long shifts sometimes, and it's really great if we got enough bodies at it, and it can be a really great experience. So I hope to encourage a lot of people. Anybody, try it. You'll like it.
Absolutely.
Plus, you can get paid.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and you can get paid. So if you're watching this production in a replay, definitely feel free to share this video on your page so you can get your friends and family some additional information about possibly volunteering, and make sure you like this video so we know that the content was helpful to you. So thank you guys so much for joining us today. We really appreciate it. And just a friendly reminder too, that our small dollar big impact grant, our next round of funding, the deadline is September 21st. You can find all the information on the AARP Wisconsin website or at the website below. And once again, these are small grants that you can apply for, up to $1,000 that can impact your community. And then for next week's show, I'm very excited. You will actually be able to meet all of the AARP Wisconsin staff. So you have met a couple today, of course, but in all, we have about 8 employees throughout the whole state of Wisconsin. So we're going to come to you and answer any questions that you might have, and you can also get to know us a little better. So we look forward to that show next Thursday. We appreciate you being here with us today. If definitely check out the websites that we have been posting throughout. If you have any additional questions, always feel free to message AARP Wisconsin through Facebook.com. Otherwise, be safe, and we look forward to seeing you next Thursday. Take care.